the Pioneer. 3 hours remaining until orbit. Hearing that, I could hardly keep calm. Spending months careening through dead space with no communication beyond my ship's AI drove me to the brink of insanity, even though I spent the past few years training for exactly this. There wasn't even a guarantee there would be any actual life at my destination, but I would be content talking to a rock at this point. Humanity was relying on people like me to be the pioneers of exoplanet colonization. My job was to determine the hostility of a candidate planet and take the measures necessary to quell those hostilities for the colony ship scheduled to arrive a few years from now. In the case of sapients, I am to initially try communicating with them to establish friendly relations, but I was armed to the ends of my hairs if things didn't go right. There are fewer natural organic parts in my body than implants and mods. Military-grade ferrous flesh skin surrounding trauma-reactive nanopiston muscles meant I could walk off a tank shell, no problem. My bones, I don't even know what they're made of. Those Jupiter big wigs keep that stuff more protected than Coca-Cola. Yeah, still a thing. But they were stronger than any alloy you could think of and somehow repaired themselves. Most of my body did, given enough time and sunlight or heat, but I'd still die if I got cut up into a million little pieces, maybe. Hasn't been tested much, and my departure was a bit rushed in the grand scheme of things. 2 hours remaining until orbit. Time really flies when you have no frame of reference. I could barely see the planet out the one window in my ship. According to scans, it was a fair bit smaller than Earth, maybe more Venus-sized, and the surface was about 50% water, though land and water were spread pretty evenly. The atmosphere was thin, but still habitable with some machine aid. Nothing I would have a problem with since my lungs have been replaced with the equivalent of air compressors. Calling the trip here unfairly harsh would be quite the understatement. As far as the Sol System Republic of Humanity was concerned, FTL drives like the ones you read about in fictional novels online were exactly that. Fiction. There's no magic button that speeds you up to light speed in an instant, not without ripping you apart first. We figured out warp technology, but that required both a sender and receiver and insane precision to stop the package from turning into a fine powder. Calibration being off by even a few microns was a catastrophic failure, delegating warp tech to moving goods and resources between specialized warp space stations that were devoid of vibrations. The trip consisted of accelerating at full speed for half the distance and then decelerating for the other half to avoid being turned into soup. The first month was definitely the hardest. Even if top-of-the-line muffling tech could completely mute the engine, not much could be done about the vibrations that it caused. I did eventually get used to it, but I haven't had a moment of stillness the entire flight and was close to shattering the glass and swimming the rest of the way to the planet. I'm not actually that desperate, though. 1 hour until stable orbit. Sensor range has been reached. The first thing I noticed was the presence of an internet. I don't know how many emotions went through me at that moment, or how many more it would have been if my brain wasn't numbed from the trip, but I was stunned for at least a minute. Advanced, sapient life. The chances of there being any life outside of germs and moss were so insanely small that mentioning the chance of sapience was pointless, since the numbers don't even sound like real language. But advanced civilization with electricity and transmitted communication. And scanners just picked up a few signals on the moons of the planet. I couldn't contain myself. I was supposed to put the ship under cloak, wait for the AI to give me a rundown on the alien etiquette, and take things slowly for the best first impression. Instead, I had the AI enable translators and plug me into the best match for what could be considered the world leader. I wasn't aware that the AI interpreted my excited command as video communication, or that I had the biggest grin on my face that I've had in all of my spacefaring deliriousness.
Ma'am, the foreign vessel is contacting us. It's a video communication. Every hair on my body stood on end. I had just been elected the planet's leader a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm in charge of the third extraterrestrial contact in our history. I was part of the decision-making committee when the first two happened, but I'd never been present during the actual contacts, only having seen recordings and attended decisions on exopolicy. I've always been in favor of the friendly, open relations party, which has been the majority due to the kind nature of the other two races that made contact with us. Trade routes and exchanges of technology were always followed by an economic boom and a golden age of development. Maybe this was the opportunity to cement myself as one of the great leaders in history. I could already see the headlines. Planet Governor Destra Sind leads successful relations with new off-worlder species and the like. After a few seconds of psyching myself up, I gave a command that I immediately regretted with all of my being. Patch them through. The only way to describe them would be demon. Front-facing eyes with circular centers that had glowing red and green rings around them. The voids in their centers seemed to shoot past any facade of bravery I put up and scrutinized my deepest thoughts of fear and regret. If it was just that, I wouldn't want to curl up into a ball and forget that I had any sort of obligation to talk to this thing. One of the species my planet had relations with also had scary eyes, but they were naturally kind and honestly didn't pose much of a threat, even if no one said it out loud. But no, that unfortunately couldn't be the end of it. This thing had its teeth on full display. They didn't look like any teeth I had seen before, even on the most ferocious predators my planet had to offer. I stared dazedly at the shiny, metallic-looking tools of murder for a few seconds before my thoughts came back to me. Was it angry? Did I do something wrong already? Maybe the way I was postured, leaning forward at the edge of my seat, was seen as a sign of aggression or insult. Maybe I reminded it of something, like the unfortunate prey on its home planet. We Meldrin had been at the bottom of the food chain for a good chunk of our evolutionary history, so I wouldn't be surprised if I looked reminiscent of some weak species. My heart dropped even further than I thought possible, filling me with a debilitating sense of dread as the demon opened its mouth and spoke. "Oh, you're kinda cute,"